人間を描かないゲームに本当の感動はない。この冬すべてのロールプレイングゲームを超えて幻想水湖伝2 12月17日発売。
Konami.
Suikoden I and II HD Remaster, Gate Rune and Dunan Unification Wars, is a long-awaited remaster from a different era of JRPG. These date back to the 90s to what I like to call the golden age of the genre. Fantastic staple RPGs such as Wild Arms, Final Fantasy, Legend of Dragoon, and many more came out to define the genre during this age of excellence. Just walking into a game store back in the late 90s would guarantee many fantastic picks to choose from in the genre. The trend carried on all that way deep into the 6th generation. The Genso Suikoden series was certainly one that had this pattern from the start, all the way to the very end of both generations. Unfortunately for JRPGs, it took a very long and depressing backseat to the aggressive shift into Western game design philosophy. This slowly led to a drought of JRPG during the 7th console gen. The aftermarket costs for old JRPG physical copies skyrocketed into astronomical pricing. Suikoden II was one such game, causing the acquisition of one to cost as much as $200 or more. Surely that couldn't be the only reason it was so expensive. Suikoden II happens to be one of the most coveted JRPG to ever exist, right alongside Final Fantasy VII and Chrono Trigger. Oftentimes, Suikoden I is left in its sequel's shadow. While Suikoden I is still certainly a respectable entry, starting the fantastic series, it certainly does show its age with very strange and almost rushed design choices. With the release of Suikoden I and II HD Remaster Gate Rune and Dunan Unification Wars, Konami has decided to bring the series back with a triumphant return, as well as hopes of correcting or streamlining both games with quality of life and updated visuals. Both games feature new translations, however. I did not suspect any obtuse political agenda-filled rewording for anyone fixated on such things. It's important to remember Suikoden I was the first of its kind, with a lofty ambition to accommodate 108 recruitable characters. In many cases, it becomes very noticeable how story segments and their dialogue feel rushed. A lot of situations involve very melancholy scenes that a very effective, poignant music track, illustrating the severity of the scene, then nearly a second right after what feels like only 2 minutes of a scene with very lacking scene animations, abruptly ends. Scenes and their tone have trouble carrying themselves as they end way too quickly, and lead the player to the next major plot of the story. The story itself is that it is engaging, and makes you feel the weight of Tyr Magdal. After the early segments of the game working for the Empire, you turn traitor to them, realizing their true intentions. From this moment onward, his role as the Tenkai Star comes forward, with the sole mission of recruiting the other 107 star heroes to overthrow and put an end to the imbalance of power throughout the region. Recruiting 108 characters is a series staple to the Genso Suikoden series. Most RPGs usually don't have more than anywhere between 4 to 8 party members. Usually they end up being mandatory and pivotal to the story. While certainly a handful of recruitable characters in Suikoden are mandatory and automatically recruited as the story progresses, the optional heroes require some backtracking and even complete side quests and items to enlist them. In one particular case, the character Sheena simply needs his father present at your party to assuage him to join your army. As more heroes are recruited, the more powerful your army gets, especially when it comes to the several war battles that take place throughout the story. One very important thing to note about recruiting the characters is that some of them are completely missable if certain things aren't done in time before you travel too far into the main storyline. Planning your actions poorly in the war battle segments can cause recruited characters to die permanently. It is strongly advised to have a character recruitment guide handy for those who are completionists, otherwise it might result in having to start the game from the beginning. There is no new game plus. Players must get it right the first time. While virtually everything about the game remains intact, several bells and whistles were added to assist modern gamers with some of its pacing. Being able to move in 8 directions with newly added diagonal sprites was a very nice surprise. It is now possible to fast-forward battles with the single press of a button in combat. Fast-forwarding battles made grinding much more efficient, and traveling through dungeons a tad less tiring, since the random battles would end quicker. Regretfully, in both games, speeding affects the sound and music too, breaking the immersion of the game. Dragon Quest VIII on the 3DS managed to do this correctly with its fast-forward feature, There is no excuse for it being an oversight here. Combat is traditional turn-based gameplay, featuring a whooping 6 characters. For those familiar with our Eiyuden Chronicles review, a lot of that translates almost one for one here, except that Unite attacks require no resource, and can be used over and over with impunity. The rune system to cast spells and other actions is usually your only other option to use, aside from regular attacking and equipped consumables. Sadly, in Suikoden I, you may only set one rune orb per character. Some characters have a unique orb permanently set to them, preventing any chance of tinkering for them. In Suikoden II, players will quickly realize a much improved game in nearly every possible aspect of its design. The character and battle sprites are far more detailed in their pixel art glory, and they have much more life as well, such as idle battle stances. The rune system is also vastly improved, allowing the assigning of up to 3 runes instead of 2, allowing for a level of tinkering and customization. Past that, the combat remains mostly the same, but the addition of their sprites having idle animations certainly does add to the spectacle. The pacing and scene direction were almost improved greatly with more time spent on them, letting the proper emotions flesh out to the player. The opening throws both heroes, Ro and Joey, right into the heart of the disaster, leading them to defect to the other side. The pacing doesn't waste the player's time one bit in Suikoden II, and manages to keep the player fully engaged from start to finish. It's even possible to recruit some of the 108 stars within the first hour of the game, with a few side quests scattered around the first region, letting you build your roster for some party composition tinkering. Many characters are outright better than others, but it's always fun building novelty parties, as it might lead to newly discovered enjoyment seeing less used heroes, as they usually tend to have amusing Unite attacks and runes. After having completed both Suikoden I and II for another time after many years, with the extra quality life features added here, it made me feel sad thinking about how little JRPG have come since the PSX era. The late 90s to early 2000s truly was the golden age of the genre, and replaying these two games has made me feel like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to course correct. Developers today should take a moment to come back to these masterpieces and figure out what went wrong with their direction, as the material to make pure art has always been here for decades. Optional characters should not be frowned upon, as well as a focus on steering from the path taken itself. Stories don't always have to take place in high school or need to kill permanent party members for shock value. The Suikoden games often go out of their way to do these things, and that's the kind of grit I miss from the genre. The stars shine bright in this franchise, and I hope to see Suikoden Triple make a return now after this incredible change of events.